now, and
Oh, yeah, he's doing that thing.
no, because we're going live, here I am back at the ET Roundtable with some of our regulars and some new faces. Hope Fitzgerald, new face, and Michael Jaliman, who was on last week, and Elizabeth Satora, Steve Spear, Marla Lombard, and Nadi Hanna. And what were you just saying, Elizabeth, about, because we're all have some connection to the Hudson Valley here. I'm actually in the Hudson Valley at this moment. So what were you saying, Elizabeth?
I was talking about how the Hudson River had gotten cleaned up due to litigation by Bobby Kennedy Jr. Suing 500 polluters up and down the river, and that the river was now the cleanest river in the Northern Hemisphere, which we mentioned last week, or I did.
Right. Yeah.
And so and then you said, Alan, that that river was sacred to the indigenous people. And I'm saying, yeah, and they must be real happy at how it got cleaned up. And that made me think of how the relationships that indigenous people have had with extraterrestrials has always interested me, because I know of no indigenous culture that had any kind of hostile relationships with ETs. And I think particularly now of my informally adopted son up in the Peruvian Andes, who had seen some spaceships under the ice of glaciers up there in the Andes. And that's one of the places that they parked their vehicles, was inside the ice, and you could see their colored lights still working through the ice.
Do you think we have hostile relationships with some of them because we're hostile people? Is that what you're saying?
No, but there's so much talk of that kind that, you know, the military tries to scare us into thinking that they're going to come and they're going to get us, and it's going to be a horrible, like old Hollywood movie invasion, you know.
Right. It's not that way.
There are people, of course, who have had negative interactions, and we don't know what the reports of negative interactions, you know, of abductions, things like that. We don't know whether those were real or staged.
Well, I had an experience, but I was going to ask Hope. No, I had an experience that was traumatic at first, but it was also transformative, which sort of happened to Whitley Strieber, and lots of people take these sort of traumatic moments of encounter, which is not sometimes intentional to be traumatic. It's just so different, their reality versus our reality, that it may appear traumatic. What do you think, Hope?
You know, it's hard to know. I've heard enough things that I guess we could say, look, there are so many different kinds of humans, and there have to be different kinds of ETs. There are many different worlds. There are many different climates. I think my sense of it, for the most part, is that they're mostly positive.
Yeah.
And that mostly here to help us. The ones that I've spoken to are very helpful, very lovely. And I agree with you, what you wrote in your book, Alan, that I agree with you wholeheartedly, that it's really up to us to raise our frequency to a point where we can actually have that interaction and learn and communicate, so that, because I think they've done that in the past. We've seen all the carving, and perhaps people in those days were a little more aware, a little more available. But so we have a lot of work to do as a species, is my opinion.
Yes, and that's what you think too, Nadi, right?
Am I known for that now? That's terrible. Absolutely. I experience as fairly primitive, and the smartest thing we could do would be to learn from all of these benevolent visitors who are here to assist us. So, I could go on, but I'll just agree. Yes.
No, you could go on a bit. I mean, well, I do want to see what Marla's picking up on her radar, because your radar wasn't tuned to the ETs for a long time, just to the astral beings. So what are you getting now that you're more familiar with the landscape, Marla?
Well, I was just thinking that my question is, so this is a question instead of an answer, but I'll also give you my answer, is how do we recognize an energy that is extraterrestrial? And I think the way that we recognize that is, and I'm sure Elizabeth would say this, that we connect and be open to everything so that we can recognize, acknowledge, and hopefully communicate with new energies that are coming in, right?
Elizabeth, yeah, did you get that?
I
Unmute.
didn't quite get the question.
Elizabeth.
Oh, well, it was kind of rhetorical.
Yeah.
I was asking, I certainly am interested to hear what everybody has to say, but I think in a way, one thing that keeps coming up for me in this new landscape of ETs is, how do we recognize them? How do we recognize them as extraterrestrial, et cetera? And, Alan, I go on about this, how is extraterrestrial different than interdimensional or other dimensional? But yeah, I'm just saying, Elizabeth, that if we're in contact, first of all, with ourselves, but then the greater world and beyond, and we're in pretty good shape, I think mentally, emotionally, and probably also physically, that then we can be more open to recognizing something that might be different, special, or a new energy coming in. So
Well, we certainly have to be open to communion, let's say, to direct contact. But as far as how do you tell angels from aliens, let's say, I had one friend who was visited by 3 beings throughout her childhood and assumed they were angels because she grew up in a very Southern Christian family. And then later, when they came back, when she was an adult, she recognized that they were probably extraterrestrials. But what's the difference? They were the same beings. And at one point in her life, she perceived them as angels. And in other points in her life, she perceived them as extraterrestrials. So when they're really benign and they're glowing with light and things like that, I don't know how you tell the difference or whether it matters. Those are both labels that humans have put on non-humans, right?
yeah, it's a little bit of our
Right.
problem, but I just answered my own question, Alan.
Well,
That's
I
good.
think
No.
Hope had your experience with those aspects.
Well, I think it's a fantastic question, and it's one that I've asked as well. So I'm
Get
right-
closer
I'm
to
right
the
with
mic.
you.
Can you get closer to the mic?
Sorry,
Okay.
Is that good?
can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that good? Anyway, I'm just saying, Marla, that I've had the same question, and so I'm right there in the same
But
place.
do you have an answer?
Well, all I can do is share my own experience, and I will say that last summer I was sitting here with Alan, and I started to channel, quite surprisingly, an ET named Tak. Never met Tak before, and Tak felt degree too different than the usual beings that I speak to. Tak in particular, because I tend to get like half my body embodied, Tak had a very long neck. And so I, felt this elongation feeling, and I didn't know why at first. And then I was sort of able to look at myself, and I saw this long neck. So, but besides the just little nuances, it wasn't that dissimilar. It wasn't that dissimilar
To other.
to other entities. I mean, once
Okay.
you're so out and open, and that, some beings are much sort of bigger in their presence, and they sort of, take over the room. But Tak could have been an angel easily.
Mm. What are you saying, Nadi? You were going to say something, Nadi?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in that working with the Arcturians, they very specifically say that the higher frequency beings just appear to us as light. And I think Marla or Elizabeth, it was, we have to interpret, we have to put a label or a construct. So we either call it angels or Jesus, any of the ascended masters, but that they would say they are all higher dimensional beings that have come to visit and assist us. So
I
that's
do
my,
have a message,
There are
Alan.
such- What's that?
I do have a message that
We
just
lost
came
you.
through.
Say that again. I have a message?
Yeah,
You have a message for me?
Well,
Oh, okay.
I do give you messages, but this one is for everyone.
Oh, okay.
And from some kind of ET source. First, I'm going to say that the two messages that really stand out to me as being extraterrestrial, I knew that they were extraterrestrial. One of them was a message that I read, Ellen, on one of the past shows.
Yes.
And the one I'm getting now, which I wasn't trying to get, is from some sort of outer form. We're here to help. When one suffers, meaning the earth, we all suffer, meaning the universe and beyond.
Mhm.
So we're here to help. When one suffers, we all suffer.
Right. And that is why they're here to help, because they don't want to keep suffering, because we're causing a lot of suffering.
well, and also that is a message of unity consciousness, right? Where there is a cosmic interrelatedness and they feel us and we feel them in a way that we are disconnected from, which goes back to Hope's, the original question of, no judgment, but yeah, we're disconnected and it's causing problems. Yeah.
But the other thing I think that some brought up, Mark, there are actually distinct beings that aren't necessarily angelic. They may be more evolved, they may be smarter, they may be more conscious, but they have an existence like each of us have their own physical existence. And that's something we're at the threshold think about. I think that's what we're pushing for with disclosure. Not that, we need government to make it official, but we need that will somehow make that distinction. So distinctions make it. Does that?
I'm not sure what Alan is saying. Can everybody else hear him?
No,
Yeah.
I think he's
what's
got
that?
better coverage. Yeah.
You got what's that?
We're only catching very minimal amount of what you're saying.
Oh,
It's in and
really?
out.
Maybe I'll take it off this. Maybe it's the mic. I'm going to change mics here. Okay. Is that better now?
Yes.
A little bit.
No, I think it's your coverage.
I'm just saying, yes, there are angelic beings. They're all.
So it's freezing going on.
Oh, we're freezing. Okay, maybe I'll find a better look. Okay, go ahead. Pick up the conversation. Okay.
Well, I'm just going to say that even though I'm the one who always asks that question about labels, I do have a sense of knowing when something is higher or lower, or as I just got that message right now from ET. So for me, it is a sense of knowing. However, after so many years of doing psychic work, I care less now about where the message is coming from, as long as it's pure, healthy, helpful. In the beginning, I was obsessed with who was talking or who was giving the message or who was sending the feeling. And I do feel less concerned about that. But I thank you, Alan, because I realize that it's really, for me, I'm not saying for everyone, a sense of knowing whether it's an extraterrestrial being or not.
Well, this is the distinction I think we're here to make as we evolve civilization within a historic context. That was my argument with Deepak Chopra. Chopra says it's all consciousness, and that's true, but it puts it outside of history. And when we say, no, there's a concrete reality to it, I want to look at it within a historical framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Wait.
I like that.
Wait, Steve, what were you saying, Steve?
Just as that is the thing we all got to remember all the time is that these extra human intelligences or beings are all unique. Every man, every woman is a star. Every one of these beings is a star. So to group them together into species sort of kind of categorization kind of discredits them, dismisses them a bit, as we are all humans and each one of us is unique. We're members of the human race, and I just want to go back to angels. Same with angels. With angels, there's powers, principalities, Elohim, cherubim, name it. There's 9, I think, categorizations of angels. So even grouping those angels together into one big subset, we can do, but it kind of narrows the field as opposed to opening it.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I think the more we talk about it, the more distinctions, more ways of understanding these higher realities can be seen. And, because we're moving into a world where these distinctions, making them will be easier for other people to accept, I think. I don't know. That's my feeling. Maybe not. Michael.
Some of them will be easy to accept, and some of them will be harder to accept. There's a range of alienness to these beings. It's a range of alienness.
Right.
There's further alien and closer things we can understand. Mediumship and telepathy and stuff is allowing us to experience the other without it being as jarring as perhaps meeting some of these other entities. And then that and if the further you open yourself up, the further possibly you're putting yourself in position for what would be a psychedelic experience, a mind expanding experience. How far can your present psychology accept a different range of reality? So it's an emergent thing, and it's also nested. And I'll just say one of the words I looked at this week was ophamine, I think it is, which is the wheels, the wheels with eyes in the Bible, the of Ezekiel. Ophamine, which is just a new word. But anyway.
Thank you, Steve. Wait, Michael, you wanted to bring up something this week you talked about on the phone. Unmute yourself. Hi. Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
No, I
I
don't.
remember, Michael.
The one thing that we had discussed was, and I think I had brought it up last week as well, that to me, people like Elizabeth, whose work was from decades ago, Elizabeth Sotoris and others, Buckminster Fuller, Jonas Salk. I worked for Buckminster Fuller in his office. I worked with Jonas Salk on he wanted me to create an institute to bring together people of wisdom, that the kind of wisdom tradition seemed stronger in terms of our generation and the people at the vanguard of our generation. And now that's fallen away, or it's not getting as much attention. And what's getting attention is the progressive movement. And in the progressive movement, there's certainly some virtuous things, but there's also some things that seem like out of perspective, like instead of being focused on challenges to planetary society, to humans as a species, there's a focus to try to redress colonialism or to take the people who are the most disadvantaged, or in their view, the most oppressed, or the most least successful, and elevate them to be the people that are most deserving of, the progressive forces on the planet should be most focused on the least advantaged. And, there's something to be said for being kind to the least advantaged. But if we do face climate change and we face planetary crises, it doesn't seem like that it's axiomatic that being the champion of the oppressed is going to lead to the major issues for the society being addressed. And it's not axiomatic that being the champions for inclusion of the oppressed or the disadvantaged or the people from different groups is what's going to, and diversity to try to bring people in to the public discourse from those groups, that it's not going to necessarily automatically bring in wisdom voices into our society.
So
so that's
what do you
part of
suggest?
what Alan and I had
What do you
discussed. Also the overlay.
What do you suggest then? I mean, what are you suggesting?
I'm really asking the question because the next overlay is, if you say something that's not acceptable to that group and they would know about it, then you get canceled, you get attacked, you can be, people can make threats to your life. And I know people who are prominent people who've been prominent in the past to also keep their mouth shut. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I know that for myself, in a very limited way, I have to be very careful what I would say. I'm from the Hudson Valley. I ran for Congress. I was the Democratic Party candidate for Congress, in the Hudson Valley in 2004. Katona was part of the district that I ran. I ran against Sue Kelly, who was the long-term Republican congresswoman. Some people thought, like Hillary's people thought, if I ran a second time, I would win, but I didn't like the political game. The consciousness was not supportive for me. But Steve, if you have some insights, I'd hear. But again, for me, someone who roamed around Afghanistan before all these wars, I have a very different perspective than most people about what's going on in Afghanistan. So
right,
Steve,
just really quickly, I'll try to, because you bring up an interesting point, Mike, if we're going to go there, I was thinking when you were speaking, I began to think of the Lucis Trust, which was founded by Alice Bailey. And that's really important because you're kind of, I think maybe your question is supposing society, sort of not a theocracy, what would it be called? Headed by like these ascended masters. Does that kind of merit fit into a social paradigm? That's what's being washed away or actually expunged in the popular culture. I'll just say, when we spoke about the Hudson River, there's a movement right now to get the Tappan Zee Bridge renamed the Tappan Zee Bridge because it's an Indian term. And Andrew Cuomo wanted it to be named for his father. Now that Andrew Cuomo has been busted for molesting multiple women, the thing is like, why don't we rename it back to the Indians as it was originally named, before the arrogance of the Cuomo family, a great liberal family who never gave a shit about anybody. The arrogance of the liberals, gets expunged. But I go back to Alice Bailey and that kind of thing, which goes back to Blotowski and goes back to this idea of, can there be a kind of hierarchical spiritual society? And is that something we want or would be valuable?
but I also think Michael was bringing up the idea when he mentioned Elizabeth and Buckminster Fuller. There was more of a sense of planetariness and of a planetary movement, and that's still around, but it's sort of been maybe taken for granted because we have the internet and obviously we're at planetary, but there was a freshness and aliveness to this movement. What do you think, Marla? Marla, go ahead.
Agree. And I think we have that today amidst all the chaos and confusion. I think we today, with, breaking down of certain systems, and the millennials really started it right, that the individual and the connection that the individuals feel or have is more acceptable. And it's, different types of behavior are acceptable. So they have helped make room for Steve, people like you and I hope, who it's more accepted for us to be who we are today than it was 20 years ago, even though in the late 60s and 70s, we had incredible things going on. So I agree with you, Michael, completely. And I think we're at a new stage of openness and hopefully.
Well, Mala, we have to remember too, though, spiritualism was one of the largest religions in the United States. You know what I mean? So, and so was Mormonism. They were, so saying that these kind of ideas weren't accepted, in the 50s and 60s, maybe they weren't a little more, you know what I mean? And there's a reason for that. And I could put that reason for that not acceptance at the doorstep of Buckminster Fuller, if I had to. I really could. I really could. I'll make that argument.
I have something to say about that. Now we can do this as individuals, and it's more accepted as individuals. The spiritualism movement, you still had to go through someone, right? You still had to go through a what's the word?
Medium.
To get the information or to get the connection. So I think we are actually at a new place.
Wait, Steve, don't attack Buckminster Fuller. Elizabeth and Michael both worked with him. And
I was a big Bucky fan, and I've kind of, I had a revelation where I said, I'm very much against social engineering. And this plays into this thing. Is everybody familiar with the Nine, the group of mediums called the Nine or the Channelers? Very, very important. Are you familiar, Hope?
Yeah.
With the Nine?
With what's her name in England? Channels the Nine.
The Nine, it's an Ennead, and they met at a house in Maine, and they were doing seances, and it was, I won't try to remember them all, very, very high society and very important political figures. I'm going to take a quick look, and I'll come back with the names in a second.
But what about them, Steve? What about them?
Well, Gene Roddenberry was influenced by the Nine. So our culture of alienists was influenced by this group called, this was in the I believe in the 50s.
But what about Buckminster Fuller? You were going to say about him.
Well, Bucky fits into this social engineering thing that's gone on since the 40s. Talking about Mahler saying it was less accepted. I think there was a move towards scientism, which Bucky was this kind of rational scientism. Bucky was a very rational guy, always, about rational and divorcing the spirit out of it. I think that's very much Mahler. Somebody told me yesterday that there will be mental health passports coming up. Mental health passports.
I don't believe that.
Well, the idea being that Mahler, if you sit there and say you see aliens, they will, and I've said it, I've been saying forced pharmaceuticals for the last 15 years is where it's going, which is 1984, which is Brave New World.
Today, which is today.
And they are social engineers also. These are all 40s, 50s. Bucky, I say to people, why was Bucky so influential? It's because Life magazine, which was one of the only media outlets in the 40s and 50s, it was everywhere. Bucky, how many times did they report on Bucky? So it was done for a purpose. I'll also say, and I'll stop, is that when Bucky gave me the choice, Utopia or Oblivion, I'm telling Bucky, that's your choice, Bucky, not mine. Don't define the choice for me.
Well, I think he was popular more, not just Life magazine. Let's hear what Elizabeth has to say about Bucky Fuller, because I think, were a big part of that, Elizabeth.
I wasn't really. I was more friends with Jonas Salk, but aware of. I think when Bucky said, though, Utopia or Oblivion, that was like shorthand for either we make a better world or we go extinct. Right. And I would have to agree with that. Right. I don't know, Steve, you're giving me something to think about in terms of Bucky, and to what extent was he a social engineer? But what we care about in social engineering is it authoritarianism?
Right.
and I so much recommend Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff's book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, because she did a beautiful job of tracing that 1950s and Korean War behavior control all the way to the present, because it's never gone away, of course. And China has led the way in how to do it through social media and, through yourself, keep the kids on cell phones all the time and then control the behavior. That is a very real danger in our world. And one of my questions here for us, because I'm an evolution biologist, I've been a scientist most of my life. I was actually studied art with Oren Lyons at Syracuse University's art school before he became an Indian chief and before I became a scientist. But in my career as a scientist or as a student of the natural world and how it works, I got very interested in the question of who are we humans? What are we humans? And I can't say that we're not GMO'd experiments, right? So
Right.
did we come from alien experiments in the first place? Isn't it? And I'd be interested to hear what the rest of you think about that, because it is what it is, but maybe it makes a difference in how we see our limitations as well as our possibilities.
Right, that's good. Hope, you have anything to say about?
Oh, well, I asked the same question, and I guess I'm inclined to more and more to think that we are some kind of experiment. I think there have been times in our geological history where they show that there are these great leaps of evolution. You would know better than I do, but where you went from having an ectoskeletal skeleton to an endoskeleton and nothing in between. And there seems to have been these moments of great leaps. And I can imagine that we as humans experience similar things. I don't know whether, it just makes sense to me. And there are a lot of people who talk about it in terms of, how many DNA strands are actually available and how many should there be available.
You're freezing up again there in Katona. Let me just say, evolution doesn't proceed by slow increments. So a certain amount of evolution is due to slow increments, but aliens aside, evolution works in fits and starts, and there are very sudden changes in biological evolution apart from alien intervention. But still, there's something about the strange human brain explosion in which, to me, we gave up, we traded in knowing what to do the way other animals do, to having to decide everything consciously, how to find mates, how to govern ourselves, how to build our societies. Everything about humans is so wide open in our choices that we're very different in that sense. And I wonder if that might have something to do with getting some other DNA mixed in with ours. As far as how many strands there are and stuff, I think you can show biologically, physically, microscopes, all of those things, how many strands are in the physical world. But that doesn't say that there aren't other strands that are higher up the keyboard where scientific devices can't measure them. So if there are extra strands, they may be at a higher vibrational level. I would hope that would be nice.
Right. I just want to say that I do think we're extraterrestrial hybrids because we are so different. We're such different animals than every other creature here on the earth. And our consciousness is really extraterrestrial, is not of the earth, which is what the Aborigines would say too. They'd go back to their world. This was when they left their earth bodies. And even in dream time, they went to the place they came from.
Yeah, but
So I think-
Alan, let's not be too black and white about this. It's not
Okay.
that either we're extraterrestrial or we're Earthlings. We're a hybrid, as you said.
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
We're
yes.
both.
Wait,
And
Nadi,
that's
you have,
confusing.
well, or not, we don't, it's a dual, I mean, we can resolve that duality, it's confusing, but okay, we'll accept it. Wait, Nadi, what were you going to say?
Steve's jumping in regardless. I have so much to say. The only thing that's hard about the roundtables is everybody says something that you want to respond to, and then it just builds up. I think my coverage will be okay. We'll see. So, yeah, I'm completely on board with the hybrid conversation. One of the things I will really recommend is Greg Braden's Missing Links series on Gaia. He does a series about our genetic manipulation, and I used to host a class on this because I find it so fascinating. He talks about a phenomenon called irreducible complexity, which, Elizabeth, this is what you were speaking to, which is, or no, actually it was Hope. At some point, there are these incredible leaps, and they're not explainable by evolution. They're just obvious manipulation. You can see where the telomeres have been cut on codons, codon number 2 specifically. Really, really cool scientific stuff to explain hybridization, and going all the way back, millions of years to interventions from slightly nefarious civilizations. But just, over time, I would actually land on the side of total hybridization because of that original intervention. And we all know the Anunnaki, the Nibiru story. So in that vein, when we're talking about spiritualism and sort of our social evolution of our constructs, I really believe that with the kids coming in, it's, we're seeing the breakdown, we're seeing the deconstruction of our social, of our societal structures, right? And I think it's going to be really challenging for us who are of older generations, because we're used to a sort of sequential evolution of building on the information that we've, explored already and discovered. I think structures are going to come in and blast things so wide open that it's going to be hard to keep up, because of that intelligence that's coming in from advanced civilizations in the hybridization program. I think they're going to know entirely new constructs that we're going to be scrambling to keep up with. And the more we can let go individually of these programs that have limited us, the better we're going to be able to do to evolve. And so that's why I think conversations about advanced civilizations and intelligences that are here to help us, then we can preemptively transition and be ready, right? And Hope, I've heard the channel with Talk, and I personally believe that we're going to have a significant incident that's going to break a lot of everything down. I think it has to go that way, because we're so entrenched that in order to recreate, we have to have a massive event. So anyway, there's my whole thing.
The massive event is what we're doing now, the forced whatever, medical intervention and the society breaking down, and all this is the collapse of civilization as we've known it, in a sense. And it's like complexity theory. There has to be a structure underneath that the old can sort of reformat at a higher, more complex level, and either we will or we won't. Yes, Steve. Steve.
So that's funny you say that, because I was thinking of atavistic resurgence, more protoplasmic inversion, atavistic resurgence, topological inversion, and morphological. I'm forgetting. I have a number of those terms I always say to myself. Protoplasmic reversion occurs in Arthur Macken's The Great God Pan, where they do a scientific experiment to pull the woman's soul out and kind of concretize the soul. I go back to the Tucker. Who saw Tucker? That was you, right, Hope? A Tuck. You saw Tuck. You said you saw a spirit called Tuck.
It's Tack. It's a being she channeled
Yeah.
called
Tuck?
Tack.
Tack.
Tack, T-A-K.
Okay, but Tack came across as Pan to me, because Pan is also Tuck, Puck, Tuck,
Yeah, that's true.
Pan. So,
Yeah.
but the idea of an atavistic resurgence, or McKenna's, McKenna had, what was his term? McKenna's was, Terence McKenna's was, geez, he had a term about the archaic
Revival, is
revival.
that-
Archaic revival, but he had a more other
Archaic
scientific
revival.
term. So are you saying, are we bringing up some chthonic past? Or are we going into the future? Or maybe Elizabeth would agree it's both in the same. And are we going, and can we go sideways in time? When we have these DNA strands, new science, and I'm not a scientist, but new science is saying that it's the topology of the DNA strands, not necessarily the amino acids, that carry a lot of information. The way the strand is nested
Yes.
and packed topologically is important.
Yeah.
So that's a new quality of information coming into the argument when we talk about DNA and strands and maybe a third strand. You know, a new quality of information comes in, which is the topology of it. So that's important, because always look for the qualities that are not, like Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's where the light comes in.
Right.
And when they made Islamic rugs, they would leave a mistake in them. They would be perfect. That mistake is where you look. Don't look where everybody's pointing at the pretty things. Look at the mistakes. Look at the cracks and find the things that are in the crack. That's a kind of, Elizabeth might be able to talk, that's kind of a novelty theory thing. You know, a Whitehead theory, I believe. But anyway.
What do you think, Elizabeth?
Well, again, there's so much to respond to. In terms of just DNA and what it does, DNA is a crystalline substance that can't do anything on its own. A virus doesn't reproduce itself. It can be reproduced, but proteins are what gets the short shrift. And what you're talking about, the way it's packed, who packed it? The proteins. Who picks out which gene to translate into, you know, to have it copied and make the protein from it? They are codes for proteins, is the only part of the DNA we even understand yet. And that's only about 5% of the DNA. But nevertheless, the proteins to me are the smart molecules. They're the ones who do all the work. They're the ones, proteomics. I believe that yes, bacteria, for instance, invented viruses as storage devices for their information, packages of DNA, RNA, and DNA with a protein coat, right? They wrap themselves around it because they know it can't do anything by itself. But there's a whole lot else that you were talking about in terms of evolution, atavistic return or what, resurgence. Was that your term? In my view of evolution, it's always the spiraling thing that goes from youth to maturity, And the youthful phase is the competitive phase that gets into things like authoritarianism. And then you expect those warriors to come home and become good citizens. It's always bothered me that the myth of Odysseus, when he comes back from all his adventures, he comes back, the only thing he does is he gives his sword to his son and they beat off the Penelope's suitors, and that's the end of the story. Where is the wisdom he gained in that journey to now become a good citizen of Ithaca, or to be able to rule Ithaca wisely, right? We don't do that part of it. So capitalism is a youthful competitive mode thing that is bent on growth. And we all know that your body had to stop growing in teenage, you know, and you couldn't keep expanding physically. Yeah, Vico. So it's a matter of maturation now. And what happens is very much the caterpillar's job is keep itself alive as a caterpillar as long as it can, to keep consuming, to keep being that caterpillar. It doesn't want to turn into a butterfly, right? It's not its job, because that genome has been held in the folds of the skin of the caterpillar all its life, but it can only come out once the caterpillar goes to sleep and turns into a chrysalis, right? And the imaginal cells can build the light on the earth butterfly. So it's a good metaphor for what's happening. And that transition is chaotic. There has to be this meltdown of the caterpillar. And that's what we're seeing now, is this last ditch stand of the caterpillar world, trying to force authoritarianism is its last ditch stand. What's fascism by definition? Mussolini thought up the word and he defined it as corporatocracy. When
Right.
corporations and governments together change the laws of the land in their favor and tell everybody what the heck can do and can't do. And
Right.
COVID has clearly been, whether it was engineered in order to create this or just used as a handy thing to use, the monarch butterfly program. Yeah, sure. And that's what we're about, is how do we build the butterfly? And one of my reasons for going back and asking about our origins as hybrids is because one of the major stories is that we were actually designed as a slave race. And somehow we got uppity, and we got uppity and developed our own intelligence, our own inner authority, and things like that. So here we are now, and we're clearly in a major chaotic.
I'm not sure if we were really designed, but
I
I
don't
don't
know.
think we were really designed as a slave race.
That's one.
I think we're designed, I think the enslavement has been our own and our fellow humans, and the potential for freedom is in each one of us, each moment. I mean, it's like we can choose to say we haven't been designed as a slave, just maybe dumbed down.
Or we can accept whatever our history was, whatever the trauma of our human childhood was all about, right? We can overcome it. We know how to do trauma therapy now, and we can get on with it and take our true, playing the whole keyboard, going into our highest vibrations. That's
Right.
all our choice now. It is all our choice.
However, I do strongly believe, and Steve's on it with the trauma is transformational. I am of the camp, Zachariah Sitchin translated document, I fully believe that we were enslaved. You can program DNA for subservience. And I do believe we were. And I believe we were also encoded with latent seeds that are to be activated at certain consciousness of, expansion. So I believe both, but I fundamentally cannot be dissuaded from believing the original slavery piece. And I just want to jump in since I'm talking. It is fascinating to see how much I firmly believe in a solitary event that shifts humanity. I think, what is the saying? You can't, everybody's going to know this. You can't build the new structure with the old paradigm, right? I think that we are going to have some kind of massive event. There is too much prophecy. There are too many indigenous cultures. There are so many people in regressed states that are speaking of this. And I really believe that it's got to be an event that breaks down any prior construct that we have of interpreting life. It has got to be that extreme. We're not even going to be able to reference all of the paradigms that we've had. I feel it's remarkable to see how strong I believe this.
Bring it on, Nadi. Bring it on. Bring it on.
But I think it's the easy way out, Nadi. The harder way is to undo it ourselves.
It's both.
What do you think? Marla?
I'm sorry,
Alan, why did your lights go off? Oh.
Oh, no, they went on. Oh, there they are. No, I said, Marla, if you can take this whole survey of history that we've been trying to break down here and go back and read those timelines, what do you get? Or is that asking too much?
Well, it's asking a lot. If I look at the timeline, I do see, and of course, I'm not a scientist in any way. Everything for me has been experiential and coming to my own conclusions. But I do see that there are big blips, but they only occur every once in a while, like millions and millions of years. I do have to say that I agree with both Nadi and Alan, even though you have different opinions. Alan, I think that you're right. I think what we're in right now is the breakdown of everything we know as it is. I mean, COVID alone has done that, right? Like everybody really is left to themselves to come to their own conclusions, as well as their own growth and growing beyond the paradigms that exist. Otherwise, it's way too stressful, right? Or that we're not using the opportunity for growth. So Nadi, I think that you're absolutely right. And I don't understand the prophecies, but I get that there have been so many, but I think we might be in the middle of it. What does everybody else think?
Can I just
Michael, you
jump
go,
in with one
Michael.
amendment? I just want to jump in with one amendment really quick, is that I
Yeah.
agree with Alan. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's both. I think we're going to have a big event and we can do the work to prepare for using it as much as possible. I think it can either take us up or down or wherever, but I'm not by any means saying that's an easy out. We've got to be doing the work to receive whatever's coming in that big event. Just to clarify.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, what do you think?
Well, what do we think? I mean, I think that there's, this material plane reality and then other realities that we're talking about. So, and I'm grounded or, trained in the Tibetan tradition where they believe that really negative times are going to come, and then beings from some other dimension, from Shambhala, which exists theoretically and also physically in some other place, are going to come and rescue the earth. I mean, I have no knowledge or no way of knowing about this, but what do we think then of what the scientists say that, climate change within the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years is going to like Edgar Casey's prophecies, which seem interestingly prescient, that the coasts are going to flood, which will hurt, most of the populations are along the coastal areas. So since the scientists are predicting that, how is that going to fit into this whole kind of falling of civilization? Is this the kind of event that will cause a rethinking or moving away from, competition to moving to cooperation like Jonas Salk wanted, or, moving away from the worst aspects of capitalism? How do people see climate change in all of this? Obama bought 3 coastal.
Right, because he wants to collect on the insurance.
Okay, so I read in the MIT Technology Journal right after Clinton was president. So whenever he left office, that he said that the biggest issue that he didn't really deal with was climate change. This was before, it was a big deal, before Gore did his thing and whatever. But I mean, I don't know. What do our psychic friends think and our intuitives?
Steve.
Let's see. I just want to talk about utopia again, because the idea of evolution, this is a Hegelian thing, and you might know this stuff, Michael, like Hegel.
Yeah, I studied
maybe
Hegel.
You could clarify this. But Hegel kind of supposed that there was this kind of, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'll just say, an ideal out there. So there was sort of this Platonic ideal that we were advancing towards. And social engineering, the social engineers were like, well, we're just accelerating towards this utopian ideal, and now who thinks they know what utopia is? This is my problem with liberals. They think they know what's best for everybody else because they have some vision, but that vision is not it's not provable. It's just a vision. So why does their vision trump everybody else's visions? You know what I mean? Like, we don't know what the future will be. We don't know what utopia can be. So when I get confronted with utopia or oblivion, my hackles raised to that, because I think that it's Bucky's utopia he's talking about, not not every person.
I think,
Okay,
that first of all,
Steve, the imaginal cells that are like stem cells in the caterpillar's skin that come out, those imaginal cells, are they utopians because they're going to form a butterfly? I don't know. To me, the concept of utopia just broadly means, can you visualize things that are better than they are at present? Do humans have the capacity for recognizing our errors, for getting things like all that fossil fuel burning was unnecessary and we don't need to keep doing it? Is that a utopian concept? I don't know. There are so many things we know that we've been doing wrong. We know that it's not cool to poison your food supply and then sell you more poisons to fix you when your immune system is wrecked by a bad food supply. I want to focus on all the things that are so obvious that we could be doing better. And does that make me a utopian if I see a future in which we're all eating organic food that's healthy and we're being nicer to each other? And we have to have goals. We have to have things to aim for. No more do I want to become perfect as a human society, because that's like, do you want to be a diamond or do you want to be pure chaos? Life is about that imbalance between order and chaos. We certainly don't want complete order as a utopian society. We want creativity. We want openness, right?
I'll just say, my friend interviewed John Lilly in like 82. My friend Forsten Bray, and they were all on ketamine, and they would teach. I think it was University of Colorado, and they would interview. Lilly was giving a talk, and my favorite line from this talk is, a girl gets up and says, "So, Dr. Lilly, you've been on ketamine for a month now. What's the goal?" And Lily goes, "Goals? Ha! Goals. Ha!" You know what I mean? Goals. Who decides what the goal is? You know what I mean? No, I'm not deciding for anybody. I hope nobody decides for anybody else. All right? I don't want Bucky doing it just because he thinks he's smart. I don't want anybody else doing it. I don't need anybody doing it. All right?
Can't we have as a goal treating each other better? The Sri Lanka movement.
That's your goal, Elizabeth. That's your goal. Maybe other people have other goals. You know what I mean? And yours, I don't want to diminish your goal as your goal, but other people have other goals. So we have to realize every man, every woman is a star. Everybody is a unique individual with unique constellation of beliefs around them. To think that one is better than the other is, God.
Where is community in your picture, which sounds pretty individualistic there?
Why is community the metric to measure anything? Where did that come from?
Aren't humans a social species?
I'm not.
Biological evolution is all about community. Nobody can live by themselves. No human being can live without any other human or other creature.
I'll let Nadia, Nadia has something, but I'll just say that community is a category that I think might not be the category to investigate this stuff with. All right? Like Uspensky says, learn to think in different categories. Thanks, and I'll let Nadia speak. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that it's the categories that are going to be blown out. I think it's our programs and our categories. And Elizabeth, I'm more on your side of social, but I really agree, Steve. Like we can't assume, even though it seems like we could assume. But I think it'd be cool to bring in the ETs at this point, because my sense is like, okay, we call them advanced civilizations for a reason. They have survived this phase. They understand what can help with survival, and I tend to believe that it's cooperation and a sense of unity consciousness. So I think, God, I was sitting on something, but it really was, I think, bringing, if we say where are we going and where can we go, I think that part of why they're here in this moment for these interventions is to say, here's where you could go. Maybe
Right.
some of you choose, maybe some of you don't, but here's an invitation. We have found that this goes well, and God, there was really
The
something.
utopian aspects of the ET, the utopian aspects of the ET phenomena is really important. You know what I mean? And the fact that the modern ETs appeared in 1947, which is when the year of the Macy conferences. So the utopian aspects of the ET is very important for this idea of utopia and oblivion. Thanks, Nadi.
Yeah. Go for it, Marla.
Well, a lot of our social community behavior, and Elizabeth, you always tell me if I'm wrong about this, but it's in our biology so that we can survive as a species, right? I mean, there's so much more to community, but that's the basic thing. So let me just admit, Alan, somehow I became the host. If ETs, if they have a different biology, which I'm guessing they must, then their sense of priorities or their sense of survival may be different than ours, certainly. And we would have to accommodate that somehow to choose to either advance or not. But this is when we come into conscious choice, right? Do we listen to our biology and the survival instincts, or do we start to move beyond
Marla, I gotta jump in because
Yeah,
if we were engineered as a slave species, then our biology is engineered as a slave species, and we should be rejecting our biology as part of our enslavement, right?
I don't know. I would say that we should accept it in order to embrace beyond it. I was having this conversation with a man who was telling me that dating and matching up is so basically biological that it doesn't matter. Now, I'm not saying this is true, but I think he had good points. Beyond, nobody's thinking, they're all responding biologically when people are dating and attracted and coming together. So pheromones, yeah, whatever it is. So I think that, especially whatever, I think that people don't accept that, when maybe if that's true, it would be a great thing to accept and embrace, and then be able to also accept that there are higher levels of interacting between men and women, right? Like, or any sexes that are attracted to one another. So people who are attracted to one another. So we don't have to get off on that, but I don't know. I'm at the stage where I really want to accept biology as part of it. And if you're saying that it's true that we were engineered, well, what are we going to do? I mean, we can't necessarily think our way out of that. We can't. We have to expand in other ways. And I think maybe accepting who we are, pheromones might be, I don't know. I think that
the other way of thinking. I'm just going to say really quickly, and I'll be quiet for a while because I know maybe I don't want to. I'm sorry. So in magical traditions, specifically Kenneth Grant, there's a thing about collecting the pheromones and the hormones and using them to, as in the sex. This is sex magic. You're using the secretions, the hormonal secretions, in certain combinations for altered states of consciousness. That's high magic. That's very esoteric sex magic. And I'll be quiet and
I want to hear what Elizabeth has to say.
Yeah, me too. Yes, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, I must say at this point, I'm a little bit baffled because I'm not sure that Steve and I seem to be on such a different wavelength. And I didn't get it before. For one thing, you seem to respond positively to the idea of trauma therapy, that even if the human childhood was traumatic, being engineered possibly as a slave society, that we can look at that and get beyond it. We know how to do trauma theory. The other thing I'm baffled about is your kind of dissing community as an idea. When I talk to audiences about making a better world, I quote Rumi and I say, there are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the earth, for example. Every one of you has something you love doing that could contribute to a better world for everybody. So do what you love doing so that you become an attractor, and then you're part of the mix. Nature never does monoculture, right? Humans can't be monocultured, but humans naturally live in these big hives. Our cities from the air look exactly like cells on a substrate. My body is a community of 50 trillion cells. My life is within the city of Honolulu, which is almost 1 million people. And yet a lot of nature gets in. I get woken up by very beautiful, colorful roosters running around loose in the streets, and our white fairy terns that are a city bird, feed their young on fish they get out of the ocean and feed them in a nest on my trees around my house. Community is just, we are one of about 6 social species that have evolved. Most of them are insect species, and we get a kind of negative view of hive mentality and all that from termites and ants and things. But the only 2 mammals that are true social species, meaning they live together by the millions cooperatively, are blind mole rats and humans. So
let me tell you about Steve, though. Steve likes to be a little contrary. And Steve, you wouldn't be here without community. You would not be in that body if it wasn't
I'm not arguing necessarily against community, because it's a quality that I'm not engaged in. I believe that we could probably find another category to describe the phenomena outside of community. Community is probably a very wishy-washy word. I'll say that all the science you've been talking about, Elizabeth, is only from the last 100 years. So I'm not going to.
Well, they've had communities for millions of years, though, Steve.
Yeah, but the social science stuff, the social science stuff is 100 years, and community, I think it's the different not the correct categorization of the phenomena of
what would you use?
Existence.
What would you use?
Tell you the truth, this isn't something I care to get into necessarily. It's not my thing.
How about your homework? How about your homework for next week, Steve, is to figure out what are alternative ways of talking about the fact that we naturally can't live alone, that we create families, which are little communities, that we keep expanding. Wait a minute. This is the first time in human history that we're being called on to see ourselves as a global species interacting rather than a bunch of empires warring each other.
Well, you're being very bold, Elizabeth, saying that this is the first time. That's very bold of you. That's very bold of you to say it's the first time, as if you know what history contains. All right? That's very bold.
In modern history, it's the first time, yes.
All right, but that's modern.
But why don't we talk to
modern history? She said history, all of human history.
Well,
I have studied Mu and Atlantis and all the other whatever Greg Braden and all those guys have come up with. I've looked at all of it. I've never seen a situation where humans all over the globe were using actual technology to communicate with each other and recognizing a unity consciousness, the idea that we as a species we have globalized.
Okay, Elizabeth,
humanity.
Just because you've never seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Okay, then maybe there's something.
We can move on.
I don't have a problem saying I don't know all of history.
Steve is the coyote, the trickster, the guy who throws things out to make people think a little hard.
So,
but let's ask Michael. Yeah, Michael's almost politician. He was hoping for a world. Go ahead, Michael. Yes.
Well, one just little thing to interject, Steve, is that Buckminster Fuller, even though he didn't really talk about it publicly, when he was at my mom's house visiting, decades ago, he talked about, or I discussed with him, his meeting His Holiness the Karmapa, who was one of the great Tibetan masters. And
Oh,
he,
yeah.
certainly believed that he was a being of exalted spiritual power. I don't know that Bucky talked about those kind of things normally publicly. And his social engineering wasn't like pushing for this way or that way. It's just saying, hey, how do we have a world where everyone has food? Or how do we have a world where there's housing for people? And then just having people look at and think about those things. He did believe in, very much in things that were environmentally sustainable, but he wasn't really put it like people were saying, we don't want the autocratic social engineering. He was just positing domains in which humans could cooperate and solve problems. In terms of the question of community, which is like at a larger level, Marla earlier was talking about some senses that she had, where there was attraction, say sexual attraction. Steve jumped in with the, with
Pheromones.
the pheromones. But what were the other ways, Marla, that you had a sense of people interacting that were higher levels or other levels, that you had a sense of? So I think of Cocoon, the movie Cocoon, where people are like sharing kind of life force energy, but was wondering what ideas you had about that. And then Steve, your ideas about, sexual magic and that domain, anything you might want to share.
Do you want to go, Steve, or should I?
Just
No,
really quickly,
go
I mean,
ahead,
there is
Marla.
a
Steve's
Tibetan
talked. Go ahead.
sex magic, right? Michael, there's a Tibetan sex magic. I know that.
Right. So,
right.
what,
And
so what
I'll leave it at that. Right. But
Well, by now that I believe in inclusion, and I think that it starts within ourselves. So I would encourage all of us to accept. So funny. Steve. I would encourage all of us to accept all our levels of, we keep hearing like body, mind, spirit, and it's such a cliche now, and even I get annoyed by it, but isn't it what we should be paying attention to in ourselves and then to others? I mean, like accepting, we're human, we are biological beings. I think that the more we understand about that in terms of science, Elizabeth, in terms of medical, in terms of, I could go on and on. And now, Alan, you're helping us discuss the higher levels of consciousness, et cetera. I mean, I think I'm probably going on.
Nadi and Elizabeth and me, I think we're trying, and maybe Steve, we're trying to include this next level, which is beyond the human, that is kind of reaching down to us, and,
I think it
and
is
hope
that.
is already in that connection.
and Alan, I gotta go, Alan. I gotta
Okay,
do this.
bye.
No, about the tetrahedron. Because if we're talking about
Right.
Bucky and we're talking about emergence of consciousness, we need to talk about the tetrahedron. And if we're
Okay.
talking about three bodies, Maria, three things, out of one comes two, out of two comes three, out of three comes the fourth. So 3 points on the plane. This is elementary flatland stuff. Then we have this degree of freedom, a little bit of J.G. Bennett in there, Michael, of the fourth point. And this fourth point is no longer locked as these are to a plane. It's locked to more of a hyperspace, another quality of dimension, I'll say, as opposed to a quantity of dimension. And this fourth point allows us a degree of freedom. It takes potentialities and allows us to have multiple actualities, but I'm not going to go there. I get a little confusing. And I'll just leave it at that. The point that there are emergent qualities from even in number. Out of one comes two, out of two comes three, out of three comes all number. I think that's the Tao. Maria Prophetess, the alchemist, said, out of one comes two. She said the same thing. So and Jung, we have to be careful. We have to also talk about the Trinity in becoming the quaternity in Jung, which is a UFO phenomena. The UFO is a quaternity. So we need, again, out of three comes four. Jung and flying saucers is a quaternity. And I'll be quiet for a while. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay.
Steve, before you go, Steve, I want to know next week.
Yeah, I meant that I was going speaking. I'm staying.
I decide to say, I want to know what kind of a world you want to live in.
That's a good question.
This one.
Thank-
As
Wait,
is.
let me
Can I say one
me
thing?
ask Hope with her kind of investigation into what are you getting as the world we want to live in from your
You know,
connection?
that's something that when I go into, when I channel the beings, this group called the Ahmad that has started to work with us for the last 9 months, they bring us into a very light-filled place. The vibration is so high. Usually we all end up sweating. It's an amazing place, but it's not defined. It's just a beingness. And when I, as a person, when I come back, you know, I know that I'm altered. I know that I've had an upgrade, let's say, or something. I try not to label things, but I know I'm different. And then I think, what is the world that I want to see? And really, it just comes to, I can't get my hands on it, because I guess I'm leaving space for something even bigger and grander than what my little mind could imagine. But what I can say is, if I could get that quality that I experience from the Ahmad, I'd be good with it. I'd be good with it. And all the ways that it's going to fall in. The only other thing that I could say as a human being who loves the planet, as I know all of you do, is that I would like to see it sparkling again. You know, and I would like to see, I'll tell you one thing. Okay. I just remembered it. So sometimes the Ahmad take us on a journey, and they took us to the new earth. I just remembered this. And in the new earth, everything, it's kind of like, what was that animated movie with the tree?
Avatar.
The blue. Yeah.
Avatar.
You know how everything was alive and
Avatar.
people were, and people, the
Avatar.
beings were in communication. There was awareness of all things. It was like that. It was we stepped onto this shore, and we went into this forest that looked every bit like, you know, one of our New England forests. But there was interaction and connection and a consciousness that it was amazing. And what was wonderful. And so in this way, it's very much like what we understand ET races to be like, which is that, and we hear this from people who have been abducted and so on, that there was conversation going on without words. You know, it was happening in here. That was the level at which we were relating to the natural environment, which was sparkling. It looked like our planet. Yes, nothingness with twinkles.
I love that, Steve. I love that.
Great. So you just had a moment glimpse of that then.
We had a whole meditation.
I have
where
a
we
question for
taken-
Hope. I want to know a little bit more about that, because that sounds exactly like my experience with indigenous peoples in the Amazon.
Yes.
How is it different is it different in our future because those of us who have gone into technological societies relearn the communion with nature? Or because many indigenous cultures did all of that you're describing?
Right. And I'm aware of that. I've done a lot, bit of shamanistic work, and I take people around the world to places that are still very alive so that we can have these conscious interactions with stones and forests and mountains and all of the things. But this was at a different level. This was at the pure communication level. Now, indigenous tribes of long ago, yes, I agree that and some of them still do in the Amazon and so on. This felt like a start over, and there was no technology at all. In fact, it wasn't needed. I was only in this one area, but you don't need technology if you're in communication with everything. Communion.
So it was, I don't know I don't know where this new earth is. I don't know if it is this earth renewed. I don't know, but this conversation just brought it back to my mind. So it's a place that I would like to be for sure.
Sounds so beautiful.
Well, I think we're close. That's utopianism, Steve. This is the ahistorical place. What we're moving towards. It's what Nadia is hoping will happen once everything gets wiped away, you know.
Well, but that is a great example. It is that we're not going to even need everything that we've ever known. There'll be this like activation, and those of us who have tuned in, and not to, I don't want to be us and them, but there, you know, there is, and there is something to be said, Alan, as you were saying, for doing our work and being prepared and getting ready. And I think
that's
that
it. People escape into the fantasy of the future. I'm not saying what you're saying isn't real and true, but we have a lot of work of cleaning up to do. We made a mess. And it's like your mother saying, you're not going to get company until you clean your room, you know? It's like that. So what we have to, I mean, that's why the environmental movements are so important. And yes, cleaning the Hudson, that's a huge step. I mean, Pete Seeger did a great job bringing awareness but that's, look at this corporation still dumping oil in places and not caring what's happening to the indigenous people. And that's a crime against humanity. Those people should be, you know, in a world court. So I don't know. There's a lot of greedy corporate people out there. And I think that's the thing against the UFO secrets. I mean, that's what's keeping the secret. It's not about aliens. It's about free energy. They don't, you know, obviously these Tic Tacs are not filling up their gas tank to get here. They're using a technology that would free us from our enslavement. That is enslavement to the corporate powers that want to manipulate economies because they're getting richer and everyone else is working for energy. So
Alan,
we need to change that.
We could talk about Tesla's utopian impulses, his communication with higher intelligences.
Well, he had the answer.
Wardenclyffe as the shamanistic world tree. All right. Now, one of the things
I agree with you, Steve. Tesla had answers.
Right. Well, one of the things they don't talk about with Tesla was he was a shaman. He had visions. He had a childhood death. His brother died. He had communication with the totem animal, the pigeon. He actually, one of the things I've discovered recently about Tesla's shamanistic connection is that Wardenclyffe functions as the world tree, which nobody's ever brought up. People don't talk about Tesla as a shaman. That's something that I've sort of come to terms with. So Tesla was also communicating. He could sustain visions like a shaman, but he was communicating with otherworldly entities. So the free energy thing falls into this again. So the utopian vision, who are the guides? We go back to the 9. I'll just go back to the 9 really quickly. Uri Geller was a 9 person. Pohavich was a 9 person, and getting involved with the 9. So who are the guides of these utopian? Are there multiple utopian futures that possibly these guides are battling to project us into?
Well, let me ask Michael, because I think, you know, Michael, I know you wanted to be a politician because you have a utopian vision, but is it logical? Is it possible? Well, go ahead.
I think it's very difficult to accomplish things in the political system that exists in the United States. I mean, and the energy of people was not conducive to my own growth and well-being. People were many people, I mean, it's not any great surprise, but, you know, a lot of politicians are very focused on their own careers. They're like business people. They weren't that different than business people trying to run a business to make a profit and benefit themselves. Only the difference is the politicians have to pretend that they care about society and they care about people and they're doing it to benefit others. When what it looked like for most of them that I ran into, not all of, was that they were very selfish. So there's a lot of hypocrisy with it, you know, which I think society is pretty aware of. But, you know, changes, if we are going to embrace a new form of energy or outlaw dumping oil in the ocean. I mean, there's limit. I mean, I don't know where oil being dumped, but we're polluting and killing off the ocean. I mean, to me, it's kind of obvious in a very basic way, not some utopian special Atlantean vision that we should have like live oceans and waterways on our planet just to have life-sustaining capacity on the planet. And that's something that government can do, and politics can influence that. I know you saw like Bernie Sanders, who, seems like a sincere person who believes his beliefs, has more of a focus, or maybe he's not, okay, but, focus on, redistribution of wealth, and has kind of a socialist ideal. But, if there was more of a movement to protect, the life-sustaining capacities of the planet, that would seem to be something that politics could aim towards. And
absolutely,
maybe like what we're talking, it'll take, and I'm open to hear what our psychic friends, maybe it takes more cataclysms and more disasters, before people open to more deeper concern and taking action.
Yeah.
So there's a philosophy, I'll just be really quick, called Accelerationism. There's a guy, Nick Land, who writes about it. Sorry, Mike?
Could you just repeat what is Accelerationism?
Accelerationism. There's a
Okay.
philosopher, Nick Land. He gets into a very interesting cybernetic sort of accelerationism crossed with Lovecraft, which is it's very well, and Bataille, George Bataille is very influential in that kind of
Well, what about it, Steve? What about it?
Well, the fact that, like Michael said, can we find a way to get through it? And basically, acceleration is saying, no, just accelerate into it, get it over with, and see what happens, I think, is the kind of thing. So it's a bit nihilistic, So there are other ways. Again, there's other ways. People have different ways of thinking about this. Having it monopolized by the media, and the media for 50 years telling us what it should be, is not possibly good for the human spirit. Everybody should create their own cosmology.
I like what Terence McKenna said. It's up to the artist, because if the artist can't find the way cannot be found. So it needs a creative aspect from the unknown to come in and give us something we have yet to think of.
Right, that's good.
Well,
Alan,
yes.
Alan, there's also, nature still is a great teacher to me.
Yes.
And one of the things that holds up politics, Michael, especially in relation to what you were saying, is that one of the great lessons in evolution biology that I figured out was that nature is profoundly conservative with things that work well, and radically creative with things that don't work. That is a partnership, a friendly partnership, that if we only could take that to heart, as in the true democracy of the Haudenosaunee in the Hudson Valley, that we allow ourselves constantly to be divided in order to be conquered. And Democrats and Republicans should stand for the conservatives who love protecting what works, and the radicals who want to change the things that don't work, and see that as a friendly division of labor, not
That
as
is
something
great.
you vote every 4 years to do one or the other is stupid.
That's a great political analysis of the whole thing and where we should go. Wait, Nadi, you had something you wanted to, thank you, Elizabeth. Nadi, yes.
Yeah, that was great.
Yes.
It's a little
Really
bit left
good.
field now, but it does incorporate things, and it goes back to Marla's issue about DNA, which I think is core. But Steve, and the whole conversation about nobody assuming what kind of utopian, what it looks like for anybody. And I think that the cool thing about an evolution of consciousness is that, Steve, if you want to be here, you can be here. And Hope or Marla or any of us, who wants to find and create a new, and I think it's like right here in a parallel dimension. I think that the shift is from our hearts into love, and then we open into that new reality. Anybody can go anywhere they want. If you want to stay here, if you want to create something new, that's like the free will coolness. And then just to get back to the DNA, I think, Marla, your point was absolutely key. I think that goes back to the issue of hybridization. Whenever a civilization gets advanced enough, they start messing with genetics. We've been doing it for a long time. But, you know, how curious is it that right now interventions have to do with our DNA? And it's really a core piece of the significance of our metaphysical being, our entirety. Like, how do we evolve? How does our consciousness expand? And you said something like something with our biology. You know, I do think the codes and the solutions and the access points are in the DNA. So I'm with you. I just wanted to say that.
No, thank you. I just wanted, before you go, Marla, I just want to say something that kind of brings Nadi and Elizabeth's statement together, is that nature messes with DNA all the time. That's how everything evolves, through hybridization, mutation, you know, things coming together. This is what's her name, who's discovered the Gaia theory, who would watch DNA from totally different species coming together to create a whole other thing. So it's part of our drive we're connected to nature, this manipulation of DNA, because we're an aspect of the greater mind, and we keep forgetting. We think, oh, it's me, I've created this, but no, we're an aspect of nature itself. So that's what I have to say. Marla.
Al, but I'll just read, when you were talking about artists, which again, the creative act is the important, might be the important thing. But I'll just say, you were talking about artists. I'm reading a book called Alchemy in Finnegan's Wake. And it says, all work of artists are fake, in the sense that they are not life, the artist nor states. The artist enjoys no corner on truth. He merely constructs more elaborate and elegant myths and lies more convincingly than the man on the street. So, you know, we can also say that the artist is a fraud. You know, again, we have to look from things from different angles.
The artist knows it's a fraud, but the essence is to let people feel the truth. When someone's singing a song, they're not like speaking, it's an artificiality, but you can feel more through the art. I mean,
Steve,
this is what...
Steve, did you see Nadi looking from another perspective?
No, I mean, I just, Elizabeth, like Alan said,
Look at Nadi.
Look at Nadi.
Disappeared.
Oh, you have to change your screen.
She didn't.
Steve.
That's her, for looking at things from another perspective.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. Wait.
Hey, and you know, Alan, we have to limit these to 90 minutes.
Okay. Wait, Marla. Okay, we'll just wrap up. Wait, Marla.
Why, Elizabeth? Elizabeth, why do we have
Because I'm crippled, Steve, and I can't sit in my chair longer.
Okay.
Oh.
I just say the authoritarianism thing. You know?
Wait. Hey, Steve, come on. No, Steve. No, wait. Sorry, Elizabeth. I'll apologize for Steve. We'll wrap it up. Okay, Marla, question to you. We will limit it. I think it's fair, because we can just go on and on. So yes. And I think you're an important piece here, Elizabeth. So don't get turned off by his negativism and authoritarianism.
I have to go because I'm in very serious pain right now. Physical pain.
All right.
Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, Elizabeth.
I hope you can join us again, Elizabeth. You kind of got her a little upset, Steve.
You know, it's she was being authoritarian. She doesn't need to tell everybody.
She wasn't being authoritarian.
Yes,
she was asking polite.
Yes,
No, she wasn't.
She was.
Steve, she was saying she likes being a part of the conversation.
She said we have to end it now. We don't have to end it now.
No, she does. You know, I think she's an important part of the conversation.
No, she is. I enjoyed it.
Okay, but now I don't know if she'll even be
people
back.
Say we have to end it now and put that stamp on it.
Well, Steve,
she talks about community and she makes the decisions. Okay.
Steve, I think some people want to be part of the whole conversation, and there can be a time limit. But anyway, Marla, what were you going to say? Wait, unmute.
Okay, so I'm all excited about our conversation tonight, as I am every week. But I do want to say that I think the psychic aspect to evolution is huge. I think it's huge for so many reasons. First of all, at the psychic levels, the communication that you talked about, Hope, is already happening. It's already happening. So developing that, I think, is giant. As a medium, when I talk to people on the other side, I hear this all the time, that they don't miss us because we're only a thought away. They all tell me this. When they think of us, we're with them, they're with us. It doesn't, animals tell me that, parents tell me that, they're happily living their own life, knowing that we can connect at any moment. So Hope, yes, I think that as we develop our abilities to communicate with other dimensions, other beings, and I want to speak to one more thing. I want to tell one of my little stories, Ellen, but
Sure, I love your stories, Marla.
But this speaks to what Elizabeth was saying and what we've all been saying, really. We like the word conscious evolution, but there's also, of course, an unconscious evolution. Okay, now DNA, I'm sorry, biological evolution would be part of that. But I want to talk about psychic evolution for a moment. So when I rapidly opened up psychically, and I was having all these experiences, visions, ecstasy, etc. But it seemed to be self-propelled and other-propelled. It wasn't really getting developed with other humans necessarily that I could notice. But one night I went to a dinner party. It was 4 women, and one was a psychic and one was a very spiritual energy worker. They were sitting on either side of me. And my friend who invited me was on the opposite side of the table. Now I'm going to talk about unconscious evolution, psychically and spiritually. So when I looked and I turned to one woman, I would start to feel like dizzy and like not able to think, and like things, I didn't know what was happening, but something big was happening. I'd be like, whoa, that was good for a minute maybe, but now I've got to disconnect from that. So I would look at the other woman. Of course, we're also sitting there in community and, sharing a meal and having a conversation. That's the other level of it, right? So I'd turn and focus to the other woman, and I would start to feel the same things. So, in an effort to be like, sort of keep it straight in a way, I would look at my friend across the table. I would not have that experience. But something so powerful happened connecting with those 2 women at a higher and deeper level that the next day I felt as if a helmet had slipped off my head, and my psychic abilities were so enhanced, especially the visual ones. So there is an unconscious evolution that we're all experiencing all the time. And I think the more of us that are living also at the psychic and spiritual levels are influencing everybody as we connect with them.
Yeah, I think you have to go through that chaos and be shaken up. And then, I think that's also what the planet is going through, chaos, to be shaken up so we can all go to another level. Politics can't do it, Michael, I guess, but nature can. Nature is the great shakeup, earthquakes and volcanoes and hurricanes and droughts and floods and fires. We're constantly being challenged to live in harmony. If not, we're shaken up somehow, or, so I think that happened to you, Marla. That's what my understanding, those other levels were just bombarding you until you evolved to this next level.
2 women were teaching me something and having a direct effect on my psychic and spiritual evolution. So much so that the next day my abilities were greatly enhanced.
Definitely. I've had that experience as well. And when we gather in groups and do shared experiences, shared meditations or whatever, shared journeys, everybody's lifted, all boats rise. And it's kind of mysterious and magical. You just can't even believe it.
But this is when I started teaching this particular workshop. Everybody was making these huge evolutionary leaps, and they weren't temporary, they were lasting, so I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
We can teach each other at many, many, many different levels, whether we know what's going on all the time or not.
But that was the challenge of initiation too. When the ancient mystery schools, they would be put through these tests and be in this kind of chaotic chaos and break through levels because, on one level, they didn't know what was going on, and, being talked to from many different places, and suddenly something would open up.
Well,
because
they had to practice dying usually.
Right. That's that too. Yes. That was.
Which also opened new neuronal pathways, right? When you have to start thinking about things differently, whether you're initiating it or it's forced upon you.
They've showed that surrealistic art also opens up that new, because you have to make the associations, whether they exist or not, because we're always telling stories, and that creates new neurological connections. So I think, I think it's fun having these conversations, because there's so many different parts that have to be explored. Oops, what happened, Nadi? Did you say what?
No, I was writing that to you, Ellen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Steve was a little too much, and I think he got it. I think Elizabeth I'm going to have to write her an email to apologize, because I think she's great, Elizabeth. I think she is really
wonderful,
really intelligent input, and
useful, so helpful.
Yeah.
Really wonderful.
Yeah, and I'd like her to come back.
It's so tricky. It's so tricky. I think Steve would appreciate honest feedback. So I just wrote to him, and it's really hard on roundtables because there's so much exciting stuff to say. And I really have to monitor myself of wanting to jump in all the time. So I totally understand what was happening. And yet, I mean, there's community, right? Like, we've got to share the screen time, and we've got to be together in it. So I think there's like this micro macro playing out, and I did just write him, and then he popped off. So I feel bad, and everybody's valuable.
Don't feel bad. I don't know where he went. Sometimes he just
goes away.
That's okay. You were expressing your truth. I was going to tell him the same thing, but don't worry. Don't worry about it. We'll do group therapy next week.
Yeah.
This is a great community.
It is. And
bring back Tony and Alan for the group therapy, okay?
You want to do group therapy?
Bring back Tony for the group therapy.
You think, okay, I don't know if
No, I'm joking. I was just joking from last time.
I know, but
I just
sometimes the truth is both, so Elizabeth wasn't saying, hey, we needed to all leave because she needed to leave. She just saw that she was committed to being with the group, so she wanted it to be a shorter time. It's not like if asked, it's not, I would say with 95% or more certainty, he has no objection to us continuing when she's not there.
Oh, she was being very polite.
Right, that it's autocratic.
She was being polite and kind.
And she was in pain. In pain.
Yes.
She told us twice she was in pain. So
I know.
I think we all heard her. Anyway, I don't want to single anybody out. I just know I would have loved to have heard a lot more from Hope. I think that's part of. I think we all. But you guys dropped off for a while, so it was tricky that way.
I know our internet connection was, but I do think we should do a special show with Hope, and everyone's invited here to talk about your topic. Can you just go over that? What you want to do a show with Hope about, Nadi?
Great. For sure, but I was so inspired. I rallied the troops. Zenka Caro's Exo Metaverse. My friend and I just got really turned on about the idea of a solar flash, and not necessarily limited to a solar flash, but a cataclysmic event. And because you find it is so prevalent in all the traditions, and so it's been coming up. People are hosting, people are sharing videos on YouTube about regress sessions where people are talking about it more and more. We usually have a solar flash every 150 years. We're overdue. I mean, there's so much going on that I generated a group call about it, and then Alan saw it and he said, yes, let's talk more. And then he mentioned your channeling about how that was part of the conversation. So I would love to do a roundtable with that.
Yeah, let's do a roundtable about solar flares.
Yes.
But,
There's a cheerful subject.
but you know what was interesting about the person?
Cataclysm.
No, it is. It's really hopeful because it could be the photonic activation of our latent DNA that's sitting there wanting it. And it's the perfect bifurcation. Sorry, but if you want to go, activate. If you want to stay and go elsewhere, everybody's choice. I get excited.
Well, cataclysm through utopianism through cataclysm or something like that. But
Yeah.
the person, the being that you channeled said it was an upgrade in the civilization, right? Wasn't he saying that?
I have to remember it was a year ago, but the sense of it, they had binary suns, and they both exploded, and so they had been able to get, some of them had been able to get to this other world that they were living on. He felt to me like he was very copacetic with that. I don't remember any bits about upgrades, but that might be just because I don't remember.
No,
'Cause I'm not in the conversation.
No, I thought when she channeled this being from this other world named Tak, whose planet was sort of wiped out or spiritually evolved through a solar flare. And that's what when you said that, Nadia, I thought, oh, you should definitely talk to Hope, because if we could bring that being through, we don't have to bring him through now,
No.
but he could give us a little history of what happens when solar flares happen to a civilized world. And
I'll see if I can reach out to him. He came one other time, and it was something where I had been on the phone with Alan or something, where Alan was in my field from afar, but still he was in my field, and talk came in, and I have to look back and see what he said. But when I'm with Alan, apparently he likes to visit.
well,
So-
let's do that in the next couple of days. I'll let everyone know here, and we'll do a solar, and you can bring your friend on, Viola.
Okay. Next couple of days are hard because making contact is jam-packed
All right.
fun. So maybe
Right.
next week or next weekend or something, or
All
whenever
right.
after the weekend.
What does that
You'll
mean?
be there, Alan. Yeah.
Marla, does that sound interesting to you? Do you know about solar flares, Marla?
No, I have a lot to learn, Alan.
Well, Nadi, tell Marla what happens with a solar flare.
Oh, it's fabulous. And I don't mean
I
that.
don't know why you like it.
I
It's
know.
very-
I know. I understand. I don't mean to be glib. It's a cataclysmic event for the planet. But the deal is it directly involves. Sorry, I'm being glib. It directly involves ET intervention. It has the ability to. It can do everything that we need to have done in terms of a reset. Oh, I froze. Did I freeze?
No, you're not frozen
Okay,
yet.
so it is like, it's to me, it solves everything. What we're talking about is a coronal mass ejection from the sun.
What does that mean, a coronal mass ejection?
A coronal, it's a big explosion of light, and it impacts our electromagnetic field incredibly. It's a reset.
And it happened to the Earth before.
It happens roughly every 150 years, and the last one was called the Carrington incident. If a situation, whatever it was, wiped out the telegraph system entirely, just as it was getting out.
That was our only mass media electrical device at the time. If
Right.
it happened today, what would it wipe out today?
Everything.
What do you mean everything?
What I mean is our grid, the potential for what it would wipe out in terms of the technology that monitors nuclear plants, electricity. We're so dependent. We are so fragile, and we don't realize it. It would knock out every telecommunications. We would not have internet. We would barely have radio. It would be a total reset. There you go. We would have to come together in community. We would have to rely on supplies that we had, and it really, just take it seriously, man. Like, get some supplies, because it really could be a legitimate thing. And I want to say, this isn't what is it? Not hyperbole.
Hyperbole.
speculation. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it is speculation, but there is so much evidence in regress sessions, like the Vedic traditions, the rapture, like on and on. Every single Hopi prophecy, every single indigenous culture has some reference to an event that shifts consciousness for humanity. And I'm excited because, yes, there'd be a lot of destruction, but I believe that in an instant, there could be photonic activation of our latent DNA. Those of us who have been prepping and working for it and opening our systems to understanding that there is so much more and multidimensionality, we can receive the potentiality of it, and we can be of assistance to those who need some help because they don't know what's going on. I know it would be a shit show, but I'm excited about it.
No, but the person you had on your show with Zinka said this could be a spiritual evolution for those who survived.
Yep. Viola Rose.
No,
Yep.
no, but it wasn't Viola. It was the person she
Either
was.
way, wouldn't it?
What's that?
It would have to be in a way.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it
Maybe.
doesn't have to be. Those could, people who weren't ready for it, would suffer, and, but it was that other woman who was doing the regression who you showed the role in.
Oh, Allison Coe. She did a video. You might want to check that out, Marla. It's really cool. She's a BQA
Let me write this down.
technique therapist. It's an offshoot of QHHT, and she had so many. Did I freeze? No, I'm
Oh,
still
you
here.
froze for a
Okay.
second. But
So many people.
say
okay.
it again.
She's had
Allison
so many
Coe.
people-
COE. Allison Coe.
Allison Coe. She's a beyond quantum healing technique therapist, which is an offshoot of QHHT, and she was having so many people lately in regress sessions talking about a solar flare, talking about coming from the ships, their sole purpose, and being here in the transition. And so it was that there were so many that she made this video recording of a transcript. She read a session, and this guy just talking about, he knew that we were here for this mission. This was our purpose. We worked together with the ETs. They came down, the ships, like the whole nine, man. And I'm getting the chills because, like, why else would we have come? We didn't come for a bad party. This is what we came for, And so, the other piece is, I can't see a way out. It's true. It gives me hope amongst some very, very big moments of despair. No doubt.
You get so excited about it, you're scaring me.
Why? Why is that scary?
Well, because it's cataclysmic. It's the destruction. It's complete destruction.
Well,
But you've been saying you've got to have renewal requires destruction, right? This is just a let's get it over with kind of thing, not a drug out, slow deconstruction of our system.
What were you saying, Hope?
well, I just think, when it starts to get scary, you think, my higher self will put me exactly where I need to be
Right.
at the right time. And I'm ready for whatever it is. If I'm going to stay here, I'm ready for whatever transformation that's going to mean. If I'm not going to stay here, I'm ready for that transformation too.
Yep.
So that way you can kind of calm your nervous system down.
Right. Hey, Marla, do you get that is something that is possible?
Possible yet. Yes. I mean, I don't think I'm very good at predicting these kinds of events, Ellen. I wish I was, but I want to tell you just a tiny thing. I was just writing this blog, which I think is actually really important, but I haven't finished it yet. But it's transcripts from a friend of mine who passed away. And the whole thing is so amazing, but this one little part applies to what Hope and Nadi are saying. And that is, this man lived a full, active, embracing, happy, fun life. He was extraordinary. But you know what he said? He said, I realized when he got to the other side that he was holding on to life like a closed fist, and that he could have let it go and allowed the flow of life and him and everything to direct rather than holding on like this.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So maybe we can all do that a little bit and just, let the flow move through. The
Yes,
flow has intelligence, right? All energy has intelligence. The flow has it too.
that's what Hope created, something called the flow. Why don't you talk about that?
I
The
don't know,
infinity.
people are getting a little.
No, just a little bit about the infinity wave,
All right.
because I think it's important.
Well, so I had a series of visions 10 years ago, and the first one was a giant wave, giant, 100 feet high. And there was a byline with this, and it said that this wave represents a push of evolution that's coming to the planet. The second vision was a side view of that, the curling wave like this. And the message was to, as just like in the sea, the water goes deep and down into the seabed in order to get its energy to create a crest. So they were saying, I was told, go into the earth, leave all your learning on the shore and go to the shaman, go to the indigenous, go to the earth, wisdom of the earth for your knowledge. And then the third vision was that cresting wave, instead of just falling back down into the water, it turned into this figure eight made of flowing water. And that hung out in the front of me for about 3 days, about this size, hanging out in front of my face. And I've been a dowser for decades. And so I finally sat down and said, what the heck is this? And long story short, it's an energy. It's a 10th dimensional energy. And it's represented by this figure eight made of flowing water. And the message is that this was an energetic gift to us for the upcoming difficult times that we were going to be having. And it serves many purposes. It is inherent in that watery flow is this 10th dimensional quality of love and compassion. So it's like of a way higher order than we're used to on this planet. But what it does is when it comes in, and it's conscious energy, when it comes in, you invite it into your field, it puts you in a state of flow automatically and starts to lift your field out of 3D. You still stay in 3D, but part of you goes higher. I mean, I don't know where necessarily, but you definitely raised your perspective. And so it's this device, it's a tool that is a wonderful thing to use in your daily life, when you're in traffic or when you're
Use what? Exactly.
use the wave. In other words, invite this with your imagination, this idea of this figure eight. You put it in your heart. You can put it there's no wrong way to do it. You can put it in your head. You can wrap your whole body in it. You can make it up to the stars and down to the center of the earth. It has 1,000,001 uses, some of which I've taught about, but it's creative. So it'll dance with your creativity, and it shifts reality. I've seen it so many times. Other people write to me how it's changed things, how it's like magic. And so when you talked about this, he talked about holding it with a fist. I'm nodding like crazy because that is exactly the lesson. One of the lessons of the infinity wave is to not do that, is to be in this flow state. So
thank you. That's great. Yeah, I've seen her infinity wave. What's your website for that?
It's we-infinity.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Well, I love that, and I think that Marla and Nadia are connected with that kind of understanding.
Yeah.
But Michael, you have anything you want to add to this conversation? Michael?
Well, I think that it's, important. I mean, there's many different levels. So on one level, I think we have our own, journey, which could be going, like Hope was saying, back to the shamanic traditions, learning from the earth, learning and developing our own spirituality, or hopefully, like Nadi says, if there is something cataclysmic, there will be some positive things that come from it. I mean, some of these things, as humans, there's nothing we can do about solar flares, particularly to influence it. Maybe psychically we can or something. It's a little beyond me, but as a normal three-dimensional person, I would like that the Earth not be, fried and, without technology or electricity or whatever. Obviously, lots of people would starve. Our food is not based on organic people grazing food in their backyards, but we have very complicated, intricate, economic system. So, but if we are meant to have these things, or these are the cycles of planetary solar cycles, it would be good to be optimistic. Or then I think that there's certainly something to be very much said for what Marla said, which is, to cherish life, not to be tight in our holding of it, but to be more open energetically, so that the higher flows can come and carry us on our journey.
Great. No, so let's do.
I think we explore many different dimensions here, and it's lovely, including the psychodynamic, which again, I would hope that people will make sure Elizabeth is, she's one of our elders in my view, not just.
I'm going to write to her because I think she adds a lot to the
Let her know that the whole group. Yeah, but let her know that all of us love and appreciate her and respect her and convey that, not just.
Yeah, well, you can write to her too. I'm going to tell her to come back next week.
But yes, yours, but also from all of us.
Yes, but you can also write to her too. You want me to just give you her email because she's
Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
but
maybe she doesn't want it out. Maybe give it to.
No, I'm not going to give it to the whole people watching, just us here. I'm sure she'd like to hear from you. I'll just put it in the chat because I think she does add a valuable piece, and
I think so.
And she needs to be honored as one of the elders, and I thought Steve was being a little rude about that, because not that it had to end because she was leaving, but which I think he misunderstood, but
I think he misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah. No, she was saying, she wanted to do, okay, here, this is, anyway, thank you everyone for joining in, and wait, did you get that? Did I send it?
No, I didn't get it.
Here. Okay, here. Oh, I just sent it. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Another interesting conversation. And
thank you, Ellen.
Marla, what are you learning every week? You say you're learning something, but what are you learning? Do you have to go?
I have to go. I'm sorry, guys, I need to go, but it was such a pleasure meeting you, and I hope to be back.
Yes, please come back.
Thank you so much, Hope. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
And thank you. I would love to hear what you're learning, Marla, but I do have to go. I'm past time.
Okay.
Another time.
So exciting.
Okay, Nadi, we'll do something with Hope, and everyone's invited, like a special solar flare evening.
Awesome. Sounds great. Let's pick a date a couple weeks out.
I will.
Yeah.
I will
All right.
let everyone know. And
Okay, bye.
bye. Thanks, Nadi. And what do you learn every week, Marla?
Well, Ellen, I love to learn, and I love our different perspectives. So I'm learning, first of all, I'm learning a new language, because you all use terms that I have, I don't know the definitions for or haven't utilized in my life. So that's really fascinating. And every show just makes me think.
Right.
Makes me think about the possibilities.
Yeah. Well, you add a lot too. And Michael, I'm glad you're here. So we'll do this again. And we never really got.
Thank you, Alan.
And everyone watching online next Wednesday, what would that be? The 25th. Yes. So we'll keep it going. And thank you. And I suggest you guys write to Elizabeth too. And I'm going to write to her and just say,
thank you.
Thank her. I'm going to thank her for being here. All right. Thank Michael. Be in touch. And Marla, hope to see and talk to you soon. And
love it.
Thank you, everyone.
So much.
Thank you, everyone watching online. It's always fun. And I think 2 hours is okay, a little bit, like to kind of talk. I mean, it goes where it goes. But anyway, all right, I'm going.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Michael, we're still live, but
So much. Maybe
poor
we should.
people.
I'll give
We'll
you-
go, but let's
I'll
talk.
give you a call. So we'll
Okay.
do it private.
Great.
Okay.
Love
right.
to. Bye.
Bye.